All right, good evening. You might take your Bibles and turn to 2 Kings 9, and we will start there in just a moment. Let me briefly just kind of pick us up where we are. That is, we're talking about the divided kingdom during this quarter. We're looking at basically the first half of that. Next quarter, you will look at the second half of the divided kingdom. And what we have been looking lately, we've been mostly looking at the kingdom of Israel, the household of Omri. Then his son Ahab is probably the one we have the most material on, mostly because of his connection to Elijah. And then his son Ahaziah, and then his next son Jehoram. Now it gets complicated because Jehoshaphat and Ahab are close friends. So Jehoshaphat's son Jehoram will marry Ahab's daughter Athaliah. So Athaliah and Ahaziah would be brothers. Athaliah, Jehoram's wife, and Jehoram, they would be brothers as well. Then Jehoram and Athaliah have a son named Ahaziah. So Ahaziah would be nephew to King Jehoram at the same time. All right? So Jehoram, Uncle Jehoram, also known as King Jehoram, but Uncle Jehoram and nephew Ahaziah in the year 841. Ahaziah has gone up to help Jehoram in battle, and who came to get him? Jehu, who drove his chariot furiously into Samaria and came and got both Jehoram in the northern kingdom, the son of Ahab, and killed Ahaziah, the grandson of Ahab. Do you remember, did we note how they treated Ahaziah differently than they did Jehoram? Do you remember? More respectfully. That's right, Mr. Creek. More respectfully. Why? Son of David, and they specifically mentioned Jehoshaphat. Like, it's not that far back that there has been faithfulness in that family, and so they actually give him a burial rather than leaving him out there kind of in the field to die. All right, now we come to, I believe we're basically ready for 2 Kings chapter 9 and about verse 30, where Ahaziah, I got to get my names right. If I don't, it's going to be super confusing, as if it's not a challenge already. In chapter 9 and verse 30, Jehu is going to come to the house of Jezebel. Now, who is Jezebel?
Ahab's wife.
Ahab's wife. All right. So in making this connection, it would be, I assume Ahab could have had multiple wives, but we don't have much. I don't think we have any indication of that. So I'm assuming Ahaziah and Jehoram's mother, this Jehoram's mother-in-law, and this Ahaziah's grandmother. All right. So you see how interwebbed all of this is at this moment. All right. So Jehu is going to come. So he's already taken out Jehoram and Ahaziah, and then he will come. This is again about the year 841 when all of this takes place, and he's going to come to Jezebel. Would you like to pick up there and take us through the end of 9 or whatever?
We'll begin at verse 30. When Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her eyes and adorned her head and looked out of the window. And as Jehu entered the gate, she said, "Is it peace, you Zimri, murderer of your master?" And he lifted up his face to the window and said, "Who is on my side?" "Who?" 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out at him. He said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled on her. Then he went in and ate and drank, and he said, "See now to this cursed woman, and bury her, for she is a king's daughter." But when they went to bury her, they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. When they came back and told him, he said, "This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite. In the territory of Jezreel, the dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel shall be as dung on the face of the field in the territory of Jezreel, so that no one can say, this is Jezebel. Did Jezebel know what was about to happen? Seems like she knew. And there she accuses, at least she knew about Zimri, didn't she? About how he killed Baasha and all of his relatives and friends.
Let me just make a quick mention. Remember how long he was king? 7 days. I think when she calls Jehu Zimri, she's not only calling him a rebel, but also you will be a short-lived one, right? You're not going to make it very far.
Yeah.
I'll say more about that in a minute.
Yeah, well, to go along with that, I have another question. Did she know the commission of Jehu here? She was expecting her doom, I suppose, and she had probably heard the prophecy in 1 Kings 21, which we talked about several times last Wednesday night.
It's amazing how many times those prophecies just keep coming up as if the point is to reiterate God's word of judgment comes true every time.
Right. Not a whole lot else to say about it. He wants to give her a decent burial, but the dogs have already eaten her, and no one's ever even going to be able to visit her grave. But she's not forgotten. What was she remembered for? What's some things that Jezebel was remembered for? Wickedness.
Bringing in Baal worship more so than even before.
Okay, she that's one I have written down. She ruled her husband pretty much, didn't she? Can you think of anything else? What about she killed the prophets? And she had Naboth killed. So, I heard a lesson one time that you don't ever hear of anybody naming their daughter Jezebel, and that's probably why.
That's right. Yeah, we do have her referenced in Revelation, and whether or not that one was actually, I assume that the woman was not actually named Jezebel, that's just how Jesus refers to her because of the kinds of things she was doing, sexual immorality and all of that.
Yeah, I read that, and I wasn't sure if it was the same referencing the same.
I don't know either, but it seems to me like the way that Revelation is written that it's just picking up on that symbolic language.
Right.
But I could see that there would actually be a bad woman named Jezebel, but I doubt it. I think probably just he's using that as a nickname for her. I will say this: I made a reference right here to we don't know if Ahab had multiple wives, and Ahaziah and Jehoram and Athaliah. I was just assuming we're all of the same mother. But chapter 10, verse 1 is about to, say, Larson, read more carefully. Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. Now, if they all came from Jezebel, that's quite the feat. I assume they did not. So it is. I guess it would be. I would assume that given her continued prominent status, that it would be her sons that get to continue to be on the throne even after Ahab's death. But it is possible, of course, that Athaliah was like the daughter of a different woman other than Jezebel. But regardless, it's all married in a situation like that. I'm just, the way it's presented seems to be very much that we should be seeing the tight connection between these families that Jehu is coming to take care of. And that's what we're going to read about in chapter 10. Before we get there, any thoughts about Jezebel in chapter 9? It is interesting to me that Jehu was going to bury her, and then when he can't, he remembers the prophecy. And it's like, well, what was your plan to bury her? And maybe that's even another iteration of God's word will come true even if the intentions of the men are not what they ought to be. Jehu was going to give her an honorable burial because she was the daughter of a pagan king, and that doesn't happen. And maybe we would think, well, I think things are changing in some ways, but maybe we think, well, what does really a burial matter? Well, it was a matter of honor. It was a matter of history. No, Peter saying in Acts 2, we know where David is buried and we can take you to that place. They couldn't say that about Jezebel. They maybe knew where the remnants got scattered, but as far as a place to bury, that wasn't the case.
And that's interesting because he remembers about Naboth's vineyard.
That's right.
He filled that one, but this one,
Yeah.
he had seemed to have forgotten, but
but remembers. Yeah. And then, but he remembers the promise when he's gotten the news, the information. And so, but, he was concerned about burying her, but not too much because he went in and had a bite to eat first. So, I mean, it's like, you can see, I think we see some mixed things in Jehu already. Maybe a dismissiveness and a anger with the house of Ahab, but maybe not an entire commitment to the will of God. So the dismissiveness and the dislike for Ahab's family, good, but where's that going to lead? And I think we'll see more of that in just a second. So let's look at chapter 10, unless anybody else has anything through chapter 9. All right. Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the rulers of the city, to the elders, to the guardians of the sons of Ahab, saying, now then, as soon as this letter comes to you, seeing your master's son are with you, there are with you chariots and horses, fortified cities also, and weapons. Select the best and fittest of your master's son, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. So he's kind of encouraging a rivalry between the 70 sons, as far as I can understand. But they were exceedingly afraid and said, behold, the 2 kings could not stand before him. How then can we stand? So I think what he's saying is, come challenge me. Like I'll take whoever the best is. And
yeah.
Well, the 2 that were already king, they couldn't stand against him. So how can we?
He's warning them.
He is warning them. It's kind of like a throwing down the gauntlet challenge. And if you're man enough, come get me. So verse 5, he was over the palace. He was over the city together with the elders and the guardians, sent to Jehu, saying, we are your servants. We will do all that you tell us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever is good in your eyes. No challenge. Then he wrote them a second letter, saying, if you're on my side, and if you are ready to obey me, take the heads of your master's sons and come to me at Jezreel tomorrow at this time. Now the king's sons, 70 persons, were with the great men of the city who were bringing them up. And as this letter came to them, they took the king's sons and slaughtered them, 70 persons, and put their heads in baskets and sent them to him at Jezreel. And when the messenger came and told him they had brought back the heads of the king's sons, he said, lay them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until morning. Then in the morning when he went out, he stood and said to all the people, you are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who struck down all these? Know then that there shall fall to the earth nothing of the word of the Lord, which the Lord spoke concerning the house of Ahab, for the Lord has done what he said by his servant Elijah. So Jehu struck down all who remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men and his close friends and his priests, until he left him none remaining. So what's Jehu doing, basically? Cleaning house. He is making sure there's no one left of the Ahab legacy. I think this is probably the most thorough description that we have of a cleaning of house. We have seen that described previously. We've seen it described previously, like when Omri or when Zimri takes over for Elah and Baasha takes over for Nadab. I think we have seen that idea of doing away with any successor. But this is a very vivid demonstration. And I wonder if it was because of the influence and power that Ahab had that Jehu is so set on this, and because of how wicked they were. God's purpose is directed in this way. So he doesn't, and it's not just descendants, it's anybody that was Ahab allied, anybody that was Ahab connected. But it looks like a lot of people are dropping those Ahab connections. They don't want to have any alliance. The eunuchs that throw Jezebel out the window, the messengers that come along the way, what are they all doing? They're doing whatever Jehu says. And so are the ones who have been entrusted with the master's sons. They're not letting, they're going to be on the side of Jehu. Okay.
He doesn't lay any blame on them.
No, that's
He tells them they're fulfilling 1 Kings 21.
All right. Anybody else? Anything through verse 11? Okay. You want to take us, or you want to, however you want to do it?
Then he set out and went to Samaria. On the way, he was at Beth Eked of the shepherds. Jehu met the relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and he said, "Who are you?" And they answered, "We are the relatives of Ahaziah, and we came down to visit the royal princes and the sons of the queen mother." He said, "Take them alive." And they took them alive and slaughtered them at the pit of Beth Eked, 42 persons, and he spared none of them. And when he departed from there, he met Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, say that word,
I would say Rechem.
Rechab, coming to meet him, and he greeted him and said to him, "Is your heart true to my heart as mine is to yours?" And Jehonadab answered, "It is." Jehu said, "If it is, give me your hand." So he gave him his hand, and Jehu took him up with him into the chariot, and he said, "Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord." So he had him ride in his chariot. And when he came to Samaria, he struck down all who remained to Ahab in Samaria till he had wiped them out, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke to Elijah. He's going to Samaria, I suppose, to sit on the throne there. And he meets up with Ahaziah's family, and he kills them. Is he doing that for the Lord, or maybe they might have been a little bit there doing it for himself? He may have been just trying to remove some opposition there. I don't know.
He promotes it as zeal for the Lord, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't know, the connections to the family of Ahaziah. Yes, some of them probably were descendants of Ahab and Jezebel, but I don't know about all of them, and so this seems like he's being very thorough, at least, and maybe even overstepping. We don't get a lot of a taste of that yet, because when he goes back to Samaria, it says, look, he's following the word of the Lord with that, wiping out the Ahaz ones. But I think there may be some indication, certainly later on, that Jehu is just doing this out of own personal zeal, even though he can frame it as zeal for God.
Right. That's the reason I mentioned that.
Yeah. Can I make mention of a cross-reference? You may have one.
Go ahead. No, right.
So Hosea 1, and we won't talk about Hosea this quarter, but I think you will next quarter, because he's one of the prophets to Israel. But remember the life of Hosea. He goes and marries Gomer, and they have the complicated relationship that God uses to talk about his relationship with Israel. All that is to say is that in Hosea 1 and verse 4, the Lord speaks to Hosea about the judgment that's coming on Israel. And this is what he says: "Name him Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will visit the bloodshed of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and I will cause the kingdom of the house of Israel to cease, and it will be on that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel." And I think that there is maybe here a reference to judgment on the way that Jehu was acting in all of this. That Jehu's family is going to receive judgment. His kingly line will receive judgment. And then obviously all of Israel will receive judgment. Now here's the interesting thing. What's wrong with what Jehu does? I think it's exactly what Mr. Timmy was pointing to. I think it's his proclamation that this is zeal for the Lord. But we're going to see that it looks like it's mostly about personal gain, that he just can throw on the tag of, look at what I'm doing to serve the Lord, right? Maybe, and this is not the same because they're not slaughtering people, but maybe we could think the rich preachers that Mr. Lonnie put on the board today, the health and wealth gospel preachers, that say give $1,000 and the Lord will give you back $1 million, and you do this. And I've seen some news stories about Joel Osteen and things like that. And what are they proclaiming that as? So Joel Osteen, when he starts a sermon, and he has everybody quote after him, "This is my Bible. I am what it says I am. I must do what it says I must do." And then he puts it down and doesn't pick it up again the rest of the service, right? So see my zeal for the Lord, see my zeal for the Word of God, and then puts it down. And what's he doing? He's getting super rich. So I say all that to say, could that be a Jehu kind of thing? Here he is. He's been called upon to be a warrior for the Lord. Great. Jehu's super excited because he wants to be king. Come see my zeal for the Lord. Is it zeal for the Lord, though? We'll have to wait and see.
We're going to see somebody do that here in just a few minutes.
That's right.
if we get to it.
Yeah. Let me make mention. He mentioned Jehonadab, the son of Rechab. We will see a Rechab or Rechab in Jeremiah 35. You remember the talk about the Rechabites? They were people who Jeremiah praises, the Lord praises, because of their high moral standard of living, because they followed the words of their father. They listened to him. Jeremiah 35, 6 and 7 might be good passages to look at. And he's judging Judah because he's saying, you have the father, right? You have a great father, and you won't listen. They have Rechab. They have Jehonadab as their father, and they listen to him. And so it's a judgment on Judah, the fact that they won't listen to God when this family will hold their high moral standards just because Grandpa said so. Well, that's a good reason to do good things, is when your parents and grandparents have led a good path. But he's saying they're just listening to an earthly man give them those instructions, and they're holding fast to it, and you won't listen to me. Now, that's going to be, about 200 years later before we'll see all of that that discussion happen. But anyway, that will be a reference where we'll see the Rechabites again, and they're mentioned here as people who would be concerned about seeing zeal for the Lord, right? And so I don't know if he understands where Jehu misses, but Jehu says, this is a guy who will appreciate my work here. Okay. Sorry, all that talking.
Ready?
Yep. You want to go to 18? Is that good? Everybody ready for verse 18? Anybody? Okay, good.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Then Jehu assembled all the people and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him much. Now therefore call to me all the prophets of Baal, all his worshippers, and all his priests. Let none be missing, for I have a great sacrifice to offer to Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. But Jehu did it with cunning in order to destroy the worshippers of Baal. And Jehu ordered, sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal, so they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they entered the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other. He said to him who was in charge of the wardrobe, bring out the vestments for all the worshippers of Baal. So he brought out the vestments. Then Jehu went into the house of Baal with Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, and he said to the worshippers of Baal, search and see that there is no servant of the Lord here among you, but only the worshippers of Baal. Then they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had stationed 80 men outside and said, the man who allows any of these whom I have given to your hands to escape shall forfeit his life. So as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guard and to the officers, go in and strike them down, let not a man escape. So when they put them to the sword, the guard and the officers cast them out and went into the inner room of the house of Baal. And they brought out the pillar that was in the house of Baal and burned it. And they demolished the pillar of Baal and demolished the house of Baal and made it a latrine to this day. He announces that he's going to serve Baal. And he calls all the worshipers and the prophets together and tells them he's going to make this great sacrifice to Baal. And he makes sure that they're all there by telling them, if you don't show up, you're going to die. So, you better be there. But little did they know, that is where they were going to die. And he gets them ready and everything, and he even burns the sacrifice. I suppose that was to keep them interested and keep them stirred up, and not to get suspicious or anything like that. And then they kill them all. Turns the building into a public restroom. That's kind of funny. It's not really funny, but it's kind of weird, Yeah, I suppose appropriate is a good word. And
yeah,
that is an interesting story.
Yes. I mean, you can just see what's happening here. And I think up to verse 27, if somebody said Jehu's doing just right, I think I would agree with them. I mean, the only thing that I'd have a little bit of a question would be the relatives of Ahaziah, the king of Judah. But even then, with all of the intermingling between the family, I might say, look, necessary has to be done. And there's really no clear condemnation of that specifically. So I would say up to verse 27, I think Jehu is at least being presented as doing just right. Now, yeah. So, Mr. Good job, Jehu.
Wait a minute.
And then
Wait a minute.
stay tuned for more. This is the twist in the plot, if you will. Verse 28. Thus Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel. Wonderful. But whenever you see something good said, Brother Tom Holly pointed this out. Whenever you see something good said and then say but, always be ready for something bad, right? You see something bad said, but then something good is going to come. So it's always that's going to change the narrative, right? Verse 28. He wiped out Baal from Israel. Yes, but oh man. Kind of breaks our heart. But Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin. That is the golden calves that were in Bethel and Dan. So is all of this for Jehu only political opportunism? I think that's a possibility. That his zeal for God only goes as far as his personal interests. Verse 16, see my zeal for the Lord. What was his personal interest? Getting rid of everybody from the house of Ahab. Why? No threats to his dynasty. No threats to his throne if the Ahabians are gone. But it's not about faithfulness to Yahweh. It's about political opportunism.
Yeah. Well, I have written down, why would he do such a thing? And which you answered there, but could he have been convinced that he was doing nothing wrong?
Yeah, I think it's possible. And maybe political opportunism is the people like the Jeroboam. Remember why Jeroboam did it? To make it more convenient for the people.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm going to keep all these people on my side, how do I work that out?
Yeah.
And he thinks he slaughtered the whole house of the king of Judah. Yeah. And so maybe he thinks he's on bad terms with them, sending them back to Jerusalem. So he goes right back to the Jeroboam problem.
Yeah. Was he convinced that the calves were a representation of God? But he falls short.
Yeah, so verse 30, the Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. That's a significant dynasty in Israel's history. But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel to sin. And then we have this, verse 32. In those days the Lord began to cut off piece of Israel. Who? Hazael. Remember, Elisha has anointed him. Elijah anointed Elisha, who anointed Hazael. And Elijah and Elisha wept. Well, why? He defeated them throughout the territory of Israel, from Jordan eastward, all the land of Gilead. Anytime you see Gilead, it's the far side of the Jordan, right? The Reuben, Gad, half-tribe of Manasseh area. The Gadites, the Reubenites, the Manasseites from Aurora by the valley of Arnon, that is Gilead and Bashan. Now the rest of the acts of Jehu and all that he did and all his might, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Jehu slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And Jehoahaz, his son, reigned in his place. And the time that Jehu reigned over Israel and Samaria was 28 years. All right. So all that is to say is one day Damascus, the capital of Syria, over which Hazael was king, will be judged in part for their work at this moment, taking away Gilead. This is Amos chapter 1 and verse 3. This is going to be several years later. You say this 760 to 753 is the guess on when Amos was prophesying. Thus says Yahweh, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4, I will not turn back in its punishment, because they threshed Gilead with implements of sharp iron. So I will send fire upon the house of Hazael, and it will consume the citadels of Ben-Hadad. Well, here this judgment is coming down on Damascus. Why? Because of the awful way that they treated the Gileadites. Now, judgment was part of God's purpose, but evidently Damascus approached it maybe in a Jehu-like way. They did it in a way that brought pride and power to themselves and weren't totally concerned about the will of God. So Jehu reigns 28 years. That'll take us about to the year 814. And what we will do is we will kind of pause there and go down to the life of what's happening in Judah. And we basically will finish up, I think, this quarter, mostly focusing on Judah, and then you'll kind of pick back up next quarter. We may finish a little bit, but we won't make it down the line of Jehu's descendants and what happens in the prophets and all that during them. Okay, everybody good? Everybody with us so far? Okay, so I think that we want to talk about Athaliah. Oh, I don't want to talk about Athaliah, but it's in the Bible, so we need to talk. Athaliah is the least pleasant person. I thought Jezebel was bad, and Jezebel was really bad, but Athaliah seems to take after the Ahab family in the absolute worst ways. So we'll have a couple of parallel accounts. If you are looking at this in Chronicles, we'll pick up in 2 Chronicles 22, verses 10 and following. Really 10 and chapter 22, verse 10, and then basically all of chapter 23 will be about that. And then all of 2 Kings 11 is about Athaliah. I try to have that here. 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles. 2 Kings 11 and 2 Chronicles 23. Okay. All right. You ready? You can take us there because I read last.
Okay, we'll read the first three there, I guess. Now, when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal family. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, the sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were being put to death. And she put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Thus they hid from Athaliah so that he was not put to death. And he remained there 6 years, hidden in the house of the Lord, while Athaliah reigned over the land. As you mentioned, Athaliah, she just picks up right where her parents left off, and she just basically kills the rest of the family. I guess that was to remove her opposition. She was wanted to be queen, I suppose. But Jehosheba, I think it's Jehoshabeth.
Yeah.
She takes her brother's son, Joash, and hides him. And we're told in Chronicles that she is the husband of Jehoiada, the priest that anoints Joash. So that's pretty important because we'll hear a lot about him.
Yeah, we talk about nobody being named Jezebel, but there should really be more girls named Jehosheba. I know that's not like the most pleasant name, but yeah. She's a beautiful character in this moment.
Well, I thought you were going to say we don't want to hear anybody named Athaliah.
Oh, no, we don't want that either. But Jehosheba, what an important role. And like imagine being married to a godly priest, seeing what's happening, and like you're a godly person, member of the family, watching all this horrific stuff happening. And I think we were with the death of Ahaziah, there was no one able from the line of David to reign on the throne. I think if we were a reader and we didn't know the end of the story, we'd say, what's going to happen? And we get just this little glimmer of hope right here. And maybe it's not even hope. It's just like maybe a desperate move on the part of Jehosheba. But anyway, still a beautiful moment.
You tell me when to stop. But in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and brought the captains of the Carites and of the guards and had them come to him in the house of the Lord. And he made a covenant with them and put them under oath in the house of the Lord. And he showed them the king's son. And he commanded them, this is the thing that you shall do. 1/3 of you, those who come off duty on the Sabbath and guard the king's house, another third being at the gate, sure, and a third at the gate behind the guard shall guard the palace. And the 2 divisions of you which come on duty enforce on the Sabbath and guard the house of the Lord on behalf of the king shall surround the king, each with his weapons in his hand, and whoever approaches the ranks is to be put to death. Be with the king when he goes out and when he comes in. The captains did according to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded, and they each brought his men who were to go off duty on the Sabbath with those who were to come on duty on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. And the priest gave the captains the spears and the shields that had been King David's, which were in the house of the Lord. I can stop right there.
Yes, sir. Be great.
Okay. So Joash is 7 years old, and Jehoiada, he's got a plan. He's had this plan, seems like he's had it put together. And he shows them Joash and tells them who he is, and he makes them swear an oath in the house of the Lord, kind of like swearing on the Bible in a court. You know, it's a solemn vow. You know, it's punishable if you break it. You know, well, is it called perjury? Lying under oath. He divides these men into groups. The ones coming off of duty, they're gonna have to do a little overtime, and they're gonna have to guard the king's house, where Athaliah and her cronies are, I suppose. And the ones that were coming on duty were going to guard the temple. They were to surround Joash when he brings him out, and kill anyone that tries to break through the guards. And I will ask this: is there anything significant about verse 10, the weapons of King David? Is that, or other than they didn't bring any weapons with them? I don't, is there anything significant about it? But
David's line is to get back on the throne. So Athaliah is there. She's not part of David's line, but now.
And it being David's weapons that make that somewhat possible is very interesting.
you have anything else on that?
No, in 2 Chronicles 23, one note is that when Jehoiada mentions them, and it may be in 2 Kings, but I didn't see it. 2 Chronicles 23, behold, the king's son shall reign. That's as Yahweh has spoken concerning the sons of David. That's what the assembly, that's what Jehoiada says to the assembly. Like, this is the right person to be on the throne. And obviously they agree with that. So this is looking at verse 11. Yes. Okay, great. So they do what he says to do. Then this is verse 12. Then he brought out the king's son and put the crown on him and gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, long live the king. Now, of course, remember, he's 7, right? So when he becomes king, Jehoiada is going to be a major mentor to him. And we will get lots of notes about that, especially in the Chronicles, that focuses a lot on that priestly line as well. But let me just go ahead. You were going to say.
What was the testimony that he gave him?
I assume it was the law.
The 10 Commandments?
Yeah. Wouldn't you think that? Is that what you were thinking?
It was his rules to live by.
That's
and
right.
his rules to govern by.
That's right.
The 10 Commandments.
And Jehoiada is a godly man and is going to guide Joash in the right way. Jehoash or Joash, depending on which text you're looking at. Joash in Kings for the most part, right? And then he's referred to as Jehoash in some other places. Anyway, okay, so this is verse 12. This is actually verse 12 in both 2 Chronicles 23 and 2 Kings 11. So, yes. What were you going to say?
Go ahead.
No, after you.
Well, you mentioned verse 4 in Chronicles or wherever it was.
Yeah.
This is the announcement here, is it not?
That's right,
In verse
yes.
12.
Yeah, so he, long live the king. Then in verse 13, well, actually it's 12 in second. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Right.
When Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she went into the house of the Lord to the people. And when she looked, there was a king standing by the pillar according to the custom, and the captains and the trumpeters beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, treason, treason. Like, listen, she's thrown any moral rules and principles and any notion of the lineage of the king out the window and then proclaiming treason. So horrific. Then Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains who served the army, bring her out between the ranks and put to death with the sword anyone who follows her. For the priest said, let her not be put to death in the house of the Lord. So they laid hands on her, and she went through the horses' entrance to the king's house, and there she was put to death. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and people, that they should be the Lord's people, and also between the king and the people. Then all the people of the land went down to the house of Baal and tore it down, his altars and his images. They broke in pieces. They killed Matan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest posted watchmen over the house of the Lord. And he took the captains, the Karites, the guards, and all the people of the land. And they brought the king down from the house of the Lord, marching through the gate of the guards of the king's house. And he took his seat on the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet after Athaliah had been put to death with the sword at the king's house. So that takes us all the way down to verse 20. And they were thankful. They were glad. The city was happy that they were putting Athaliah to death. And so that will end the only interruption in the line of David until the end of the kingdom of Judah. That'll end the only temporary interruption of that. And we'll pick up with King Jehoash. In verse 21, you see him, Jehoash or Joash, as he is referred to in the Chronicles. It's just an abbreviated name of it. But that's why I try to have it indicated there on the screen. Okay, so that gets us all the way basically through chapter 11 and 2 Chronicles 23 at the same time.
I'd like to say this.
Yes,
she
sir.
was led through the horse's entrance. She was like a horse that couldn't be broken.
Yeah, that's right.
She was,
Yeah, do you think that was like she doesn't get to go through the royal entrance anymore? She has to go through the entrance
Yeah.
that would be used for
Of course, the purpose of it was not to defile the
the
temple.
temple. That's right. That's right. Very good. All right. Well, it is about 2 or 3 minutes till we're supposed to be done. And I don't know if we want to take the time to jump in. You have something you want to pick up on? That would be helpful.
Maybe when we do start next time, we may ought to just go to 2 Chronicles 24.
Yes.
It has a lot more details
That's
than
exactly
than 2 Kings
Yes,
12
and
does.
really, 2 Chronicles will carry us from, well, just 24 will give us a lot more than, you're exactly right, than what 2 Kings will, both in celebration and in sadness, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I think about Jehoiada here.
Mm-hmm.
He is doing what Athaliah should have done as far as, preparing someone to be the king. Of course, she's the reason that Josh was in that position to begin with, but let's just imagine she wasn't. He's the one that's acting more like family. And
Yeah.
she is.
That's right.
Yeah, he raised him.
Oh, yeah.
And consider that Athaliah, every indication is she would have killed him. And the thing is that she is either his grandmother or his half grandmother, right? Like she would be at least his grandfather's wife. And so just a horrific occasion here. So think about the ruthlessness of Athaliah in all of this. Okay. Well, fortunately, in some ways, I guess for us, that ends basically the discussion of the line of Ahab for the most part. We're able to move on beyond that terrible period in Israel's history. It will not get a ton better, but it is a little better, at least for a little while, without the worship of Baal. But then things will get quickly worse as we go. So I know all of this here was a little complicated figuring all that out, but it really kind of clarifies now. We're going to have the line of Jehu here and for 100 years nearly. And then, of course, we'll continue with the line of David here.
Yeah. We'll have one of those wait a minute moments here
Yes,
with
that's right.
Joash.
Okay. Any comments, thoughts, questions before we're done tonight?
Jesus said in Matthew 7, and he will save me with what we've done in your name. It happens today, just like we did then.
Yeah.
People are claiming to be for the Lord, doing good things.
Yeah.
But they're really not.
So like a Jehu complex. That's exactly right. All right, very good. Thank you very much, and we'll, Lord willing, pick up on Sunday night.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.